Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, of which we're an integral part, with deep gratitude to all of our ancestors who have brought us to the present moment, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene the fourth day of a 5-day program by the Pachamama Alliance on how we can attune ourselves to the spirit of the Amazon, both to save by working together with the indigenous peoples there, that precious heart of the planet, the lungs of the planet. It's one of the central nodes of our planetary ecology, and how we can learn from those peoples and how we can animate and refine our own spirituality. So those of us who have forgotten the trees, who've forgotten nature, forgotten that we are nature, can remember our essential identity. The Pachamama Alliance embodies just about more than any other organization I can think of what it means to live a committed life as an organization, and as individuals. And this is very important for us as we contemplate the gravity of the world crisis and the fact that we are literally teetering on the precipice and have now entered into code red at many dimensions of human and ecological existence, not only climate change, but also democracy in the face of rising authoritarianism, planetary public health, global geostrategic balances and conflict. And so how we, as the people of the world, how do we rise? We rise by understanding how we can commit ourselves to a purpose that's larger than we are, that animates us to be who we need to be at this critical moment, when nothing less than a human revolution of consciousness and action on behalf of the Amazon, on behalf of the global ecology, will suffice to save us, because it's increasingly clear that our governments are not. And that leaves it to us. And that's not actually a bad place to be, if you remember Margaret Mead and her assertion that it is, in the end, only a small group of committed people that actually do change history. You think of Arnold Toynbee's masterwork, A Study of History, where he studied the 23 civilizations that at that time we knew about. And in every single case, he said, civilizations and empires are started by what he called a creative minority, a small group of people who coalesce around a vision of the future and then dedicate their lives, both as individuals and as a group, to be the proximate causation of the vision that they know they need to achieve to satisfy the destiny for which they were born. You know, one thinks of Alexander the Great, you know, and the term that his biographers used of Alexander was a Greek term, pothos. And pothos means a deep yearning of the soul that so enlivens the person that they're left with no other choice but to fulfill, again, the destiny for which they were born. And as we contemplate a world that is about ready to destroy itself because of human action, finding the purpose for which we were born, finding the commitment that we can embody to save ourselves, is perhaps the most important imperative, challenging us at the present moment. So we want to dive in today to what constitutes a committed life. What constitutes a committed organization? What constitutes a committed mass movement of people who've never met, but are completely aligned? That's what it's going to take to move the arc of history in our time. Before we dive into this very deep and inspiring domain, let us pause as we do just to breathe together in a coherent way. So what we're going to do now for 15 breaths as we just center ourselves, no matter where you are in the world today, no matter what you're doing, if you can, take the next several minutes. And Georg will put up a card showing a 5-pointed star, which is a picture of what the orbital path of the planet Venus and the planet Earth. It's what we make as we orbit the sun. It's a 5-pointed star. We're going to breathe 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. And the number 5 is the number of Venus, and that's the goddess. That's the mother. So you're breathing in the mother, you're bringing out the mother, and it's all Pachamama. And let us begin by breathing as one. Georg? Thank you, everyone. It's such a powerful thing to breathe as one. You know, the Greek philosopher Plotinus said that the whole universe breathes as one. That's one reason why we put up the card around Venus. When we're breathing, the universe is breathing. When we humans breathe, the trees are breathing. Beautiful thing. So thank you. Now it's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce my old friend and dear friend and colleague, Lynne Twist, who with her husband and partner, Bill Twist and John Perkins and others, founded the Pachamama Alliance back in the mid-1990s. I think it was 1996, Lynn, and have been caring and curating the Amazonian dream ever since. They've been awakening the dreamer all around the world with this passion and commitment. So I just want to welcome you and thank you, Lynn, for everything that you've done and the commitment that you and Bill and John and all of you at Pachamama have embodied on behalf of us all around the spirit of the jungle. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Well, Pachamama began actually, was named Pachamama in 1996, but it really began in 1994. And I'm going to tell you that story because one of the things that we wanted to use these beautiful 5 days that you've given us, Jim, of Humanity Rising, was to really, express and communicate the breadth and scope and depth of the work of Pachamama Alliance in all of its expression, including what it has fomented and fostered and brought into existence that now is entities of their own. And just to review, on Monday, I know you all, those of you who were with us on Monday, heard from John Perkins and Bill Twist, the two other co-founders, and Belen Pius, who directs everything we do in South America with the Amazonian indigenous groups, the 30 indigenous nations that we work with in Ecuador and Peru at the very beginning of the Amazon system. And then on Tuesday, we heard from Bill Twist, the other co-founder, and Natalia Green and Cormac Cullinan about something that got born out of the kind of petri dish of the Pachamama Alliance, which is the movement, the worldwide movement that began in Ecuador to give legal rights to nature under fundamental primary law as a living entity, so that river systems and forest systems can be defended in court. And there's precedent now, and that movement has moved powerfully in the world to many other places, and many other examples of municipalities and countries giving legal rights to nature, which is just a huge breakthrough in the way we think and the way we perceive what we used to think of as our property, things that we could own a piece of the earth. And then yesterday, I was privileged to be with my colleague Domingo Paez and Atosa Sultani to talk about the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative, which is the largest indigenous-led conservation program on Earth, which is to preserve and put in a permanent protected status or permanent protection, 88 million acres of primary rainforest, much of which is roadless and pristine, at the base of the Andes, which is at the source of the entire huge Amazon rainforest system, which is larger than the United States, and to establish this ecosystem as the first ecosystem in the world to be permanently protected, given its importance, given its depth of biodiversity, given the commitment of the indigenous people, 30 indigenous nations. These are nations that have come together. They used to war with each other, and now they've come together to be the fierce and unrelenting custodians of this precious ecosystem that repopulated life after the Ice Age. So that was yesterday. And today, We're going to focus on how Pachamama Alliance began, its origin, because it's a demonstration of the power of a calling, which is the name of this session, and how to live a committed life that matches what you're called to do and be. And to say what's so obvious, but I want to say it, Jim Garrison lives his calling. This is 539, the 539th session of Humanity Rising, if I have the numbers right, which Jim initiated and inaugurated to really bring us together during the pandemic, when we were terrified with what was going on, this global pandemic. We were shut in our homes. We couldn't go out. We could barely go to the grocery store. We had to mask, sometimes even indoors in our own homes. And we needed to connect. We needed to be together. We needed community. We needed to know what was going on. We needed to have a taproot, a touchstone of beingness, of transformation, of possibility, of source. And Jim, God bless you, Jim, created that with Humanity Rising. And I was fortunate enough to be on session 1. I don't know if you remember that, Jim, but you started session 1 with a wonderful session of women, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. So
indeed.
So from session 1 to 539, I think I've been on 3 or 4 in between. I just have to bow to your extraordinary leadership and you responding to and living into your calling since I've known you. And I didn't even mention the State of the World Forum, which was for me the source of many of my most precious relationships, which Jim convened in 1995 through the year 2000 with President Gorbachev. So, you know, in many ways, this session is a tribute to you, Jim, and I will get into my talk, but I just wanted to start with my love and reverence and deep gratitude to you for living your committed life, because it gave me mine. So thank you. So I also have 2 other people, you see their pictures on the screen, 2 extraordinary women that I'm going to call on in a few minutes. But let me start by sharing the Pachamama Alliance's origin story, because it is an example, an expression of both resisting a calling, which I did, and responding to a calling and then answering it. And I was a very, very devoted leader of the Hunger Project. I was that was my calling for much of my life for almost 27 years. I was committed to ending world hunger, and that's a whole story of its own. And I thought I would do that for the rest of my life. I got that calling when I was 29. I had 3 little kids. It was completely inconvenient because they were 3, 5, and 7. And working on ending world hunger required traveling the world, particularly the part of the world where hungry people live, where people living in the conditions of hunger live, like Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, places that are hard to get to, not easily navigated. And certainly you don't take your 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old on those trips when you go. So my Hunger Project years were very challenging for me as a young mother, but the Hunger Project and the commitment to end hunger swept me off my feet. And I felt such a deep calling in my heart, in my soul, and actually in my body that I couldn't not respond to it. And so I became one of the leaders, not the CEO or the president, but one of the key leaders and early leaders of the Hunger Project, which ended up being, has become a very powerful global movement. And by the time I was in my late 40s, I was responsible for fundraising and some of the operations, most of the volunteer network and the fundraising in 52 countries that it's hard to figure out how to do anything in Ethiopia when everything's in breakdown and people are hungry, or Ghana, or Cote d'Ivoire, or India. But I also was responsible for operations in Japan, in Korea, fundraising in Europe, in France, in Germany, in Italy. So I had a big job. Did I say big? It was big. And by then my children were teenagers and starting to go off to college. And I thought I would do the Hunger Project for the rest of my life. I had made that commitment. I had said to the hundreds of thousands of volunteers that would sometimes be, motivated and inspired by my voice. I've been here since the beginning. The Hunger Project began in 1977. And I said, I'll be here till the end. I'll be here till the end of my life, or the end of hunger, whichever comes first. And I meant it. I really meant it. And people counted on me to fulfill that commitment and never leave. Other people came and went in the Hunger Project, but myself and our wonderful CEO, Joan Holmes, we were like the center of the Hunger Project, like the lodgepole. We would never leave. I mean, everybody could depend on Joan Holmes and Lynne Twist. And then something happened to me, and that's where I want to start. I was doing a favor for one of our donors, and as a fundraiser, sometimes your donors are some of the most important people in your orbit, especially those that give generously and are very unrestricted in their giving. And I had a wonderful donor whose name was Bob, and he invited me to go to Guatemala, where we had no operations there. We weren't working in Central or South America. The Hunger Project was focused on Southern Africa and the subcontinent of India and all those countries. I mean, the sub-Saharan Africa, not Southern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So all of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, all of Black Africa, you might say. And then the Indian subcontinent, where hunger was extremely severe in both of those places. But there wasn't a lot of hunger in South America or Central America. Poverty, yes, but people were fed. So the Hunger Project hadn't gone there, at least not at that time. And when my friend Bob, he had a wonderful love for the Hunger Project, but he also had his own organization in Guatemala. And he admired our fundraising methodology, which was quite unique. And so he asked me to take a leave and go to Guatemala and train his development director during a board meeting for his organization in Guatemala, and take a group of donors there and kind of show his development director how we did learning journeys in the Hunger Project for our donors by taking them to see what they were paying for, what they were funding, and partnering with their colleagues. And so off I went to Guatemala for a leave, kind of like a favor for Bob. And I left my Hunger Project colleagues in charge just for a little while. And I went there with John Perkins. And John Perkins is a man who had worked in the Ecuadorian Amazon for many, many years as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years. But then he stayed and worked to learn how to become a shaman. And he was very devoted to shamanism and indigenous people, particularly the Shuar people in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So he was on the board of this organization in Guatemala. So he was part of the picture when we went to Guatemala, and he was also a close friend of mine. So during this trip, John, who has been trained as a shaman, said to me, there's a shaman running this whole thing, and they're not telling us that. There's a Mayan shaman here in Guatemala. I can feel it, who's behind all these activities that we're looking at, but somehow we're not interacting with him. But I'm going to find out who he is, and we're going to go see him. So through John's real deep instinct, we met a man named Roberto Pose. He agreed to do a shamanic ceremony with a small group of us because of John's wonderful skills and capacity to talk shaman to shaman. And so we, some of us, not the whole group, but 12 of us, chose to go to a mountaintop in Guatemala at midnight near Chichicastenango, if you know Guatemala, any of you, Totonicapan, and be part of a shamanic ceremony that began at midnight on a starry night in Guatemala. And this was in 1994, okay, 1994. And it was it's kind of a strange thing. I'd never been in a shamanic ceremony, and my head was still in the Hunger Project, all my work over in Africa and Asia, but I was doing this favor for a friend, so I went along. And the shaman was a very strange looking man, but a very powerful man. You could tell that the minute you saw him, even though it was very dark. And he had built a huge fire, and he was waiting for us on this mountaintop. And we got there, and he told us in his way. He did not speak Spanish, by the way, and he definitely did not speak English. So John Perkins, my colleague, who was fluent in Spanish and spoke a little Mayan, became a kind of a rough translator for this encounter. And so the shaman told us to lay down around this fire that he'd built with our feet towards the fire. So you can kind of picture we were like a wagon wheel around this fire. And then the shaman told us to journey through John. And I didn't know what that meant, but it was midnight and I was tired. So, I figured it might be something about meditation or use your imagination. So I closed my eyes. And then the shaman, with John's help, John was drumming and the shaman was chanting, started to call us into some sort of an altered state. And you have to imagine now, if you can picture a starry, starry, starry sky, just zillions of stars. There was no electric lights around where we were. We were on top of a mountain. A fire at our feet, and then this drumming, and then the shaman singing, chanting, whistling in a strange language. But his voice was just mesmerizing, and his whistling was hypnotic, and it was just incredible how it sort of took me somewhere. And it was like the most amazing sound. And the drumming and the chanting and the crackling of the fire. And I was just in some state of some kind of bliss. And then I noticed my right arm, the right side of my body quivering. And I felt my right arm start to extend, and I felt like it was becoming some sort of a wing. And then my left arm started to quiver, and I had to extend it. I couldn't hold it near my body, and it became some sort of a wing. And then this strange thing started to grow on my face, and I realized it was a beak, and I had to fly. There was no lying there for not even one more second. And I began to lift my body up in slow motion, and I began to fly. And I remember looking down and seeing myself down there, and all 12 of us like a wagon wheel around this fire. And I could hear the shaman's voice, his singing, his chanting, his whistling, and the drum as if it was right next to me. Yet I was going farther and farther and farther up into the sky from this scene. And I started to look up and fly towards this incredible stars, just a magnitude, a plethora, a heaven of stars. It was so inspiring. It was just moving me to my core as I flew in slow motion. It was a euphoric experience. And then I looked down again to see where it was, what was on the ground, and I realized it was dawning. And I was flying over a vast, 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 unending forest of green. And it was so beautiful and so vast and so green and so thick and glorious. And it went forever. And then at a certain moment, and I'm flying like this in slow motion, it felt so good to fly. And then at a certain point, these disembodied faces of men with orange geometric face paint on their faces and yellow, red, and black feather crowns on their heads started to float up from the forest floor towards the bird and call to the bird in this strange tongue that I didn't understand. And then they would float back into the forest and disappear. and I would keep flying. And then a few minutes, or maybe it was seconds later, I don't know, time had stopped. They would appear again and call and speak to the bird with their orange geometric face paint, their yellow, red, and black feather crowns. And then they would disappear down into the trees again. And then they would appear again, and then they would disappear, and then they would appear again, and they would disappear. And they would call to the bird each time they would appear. And it was moving, it was hypnotic, it was mesmerizing, it was euphoric, it was blissful, it was so, so awesome. And it was real. And I was totally mesmerized by it. And then I heard a very loud drum beat, bang, 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 bang. And I realized, oh my God, what was that? I didn't have wings. There was no beak on my face. And I sat up, and the fire had gone down to embers. So it was a pretty long period of time, I imagine. I don't know. And I looked around the circle. You could see the glow of people's faces in the embers. And everybody had had some sort of a mind-boggling experience. You could see on their faces. They weren't waking up from a nap. It wasn't like that. And then the shaman, through John, asked us to share our experiences. And one by one, people shared. And at one point, it was my turn, and I shared the story I've just told you. And then it went around the circle, and John Perkins shared a series of images very much like my own. So the shaman then completed the ritual with everybody and kept John and I so that we would understand that something special had occurred. And John knew that anyway, because John had just been with the Shuar people, and he knew that the Achuar people, who had had very little contact with the outside world, the Achuar tribe in the Ecuadorian Amazon, was going to seek contact. So John said to me and the shaman said, no, this was not a normal vision. This was a communication, and you need to respond. You need to go to them. And I didn't buy it. I didn't understand it. I was totally confused by the whole thing. But John said, Lynn, these are the Achuar people. I told you, they're ready for contact. They want us to come to them. We need to go, and we need to bring people to them. It's first contact. It's a huge privilege. You need to drop everything, and we need to go to the Amazon. I said to John, I can't do that. I'm ending world hunger. Please. You go. That's your work. It's not mine. So I said, no way, even though I was very unsettled by the experience. And I went on to Ghana, a country in West Africa, for a board meeting of the Hunger Project of Ghana. And I was in the Novotel, which is a hotel in Ghana, in Accra, which is the capital, with 8 people in a board meeting for the Hunger Project Ghana. And Ghanaian people have very dark skin, almost blue-black skin. They're beautiful people. And there were 5 men and 3 women in this meeting, and then myself. And the Ghanaian board was having its meeting, and I was sitting in, and very interesting conversation. And then at a certain point, the men, and only the men, started having orange geometric face paint on their blue-black faces. And nobody said anything about it. And I looked at them, but everybody kept talking as if this wasn't happening. So I thought for sure I was going crazy from the weird thing that happened to me in Guatemala, but I didn't say anything. And then I did what ladies do. We go to the ladies' room. That's always what we do. That's a wonderful thing. You can always go to the ladies' room. So I went to the ladies' room. I splashed water in my face. I tried to come out of it, whatever it is that I was seeing. I went back into the room. Everybody was still talking. Everybody was normal. And then in maybe 10 minutes, it happened again. Orange geometric face paint appeared on their black faces, just the men. And I burst into tears. And everybody wanted to know what's wrong. And I said, well, I'm feeling very, very sick. Too many time zones, too many countries. I'm going to go home. So it was 1994, no cell phones, no internet. So I went to my room, packed my bag, went straight to the airport. And from Accra, Ghana to Frankfurt, the faces kept coming on the plane. From Frankfurt to New York, the faces kept coming. And from New York to San Francisco, the faces kept coming. Whether I was sleeping or awake, they came. And when I got home, I didn't tell Bill the way I'm telling you because I thought I was going crazy and I was embarrassed. So I tried to reach John Perkins, who had gone back to the Amazon, but eventually he did come home. And when he came home to hundreds of voicemails, because that's what you could do, and all kinds of faxes, because that's what you could do then. You couldn't, that's how you left messages for people in 1994. And he said, Lynn, they're waiting for us. We need to bring 12 people, including ourselves, to see the Achuar. They're ready for contact. They've been communicating to us and we need to go. And so I said, okay. And so we picked 10 people. I picked my husband, Bill, first, and we went down to Quito, down the Valley of the Volcanoes, over the eastern side of the Andes, down the Pastaza River Canyon, and flew in small planes into Achuar territory and landed on a dirt landing strip. And once we were all there, they came out of the forest with their orange geometric face paint, their yellow, red, and black feather crowns. And we had an encounter that changed all of our lives with the Achuar people, who asked us to work with them to preserve the sacred headwaters of the Amazon and to change the dream of the modern world. So that experience stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know how to leave the Hunger Project. I thought, well, I'm going to be there for the rest of my life, so I'll do this on the side, this work with the indigenous people of the Amazon, the Achuar people. Bill got very involved with it right away, but I was so stretched. 3 kids, running 52 countries, fundraising operations. And then suddenly now I'm working in the Amazon rainforest with an indigenous tribe. I just couldn't do it all. And I was saved, I must say, by malaria, because I got very, very sick. I got malaria. And I couldn't really work for anybody for about a year. I was just laid low. And that gift of being ill had me stop and realize I was being called for the second chapter of my adult life to a completely new mission and vision. And that if I didn't accept that calling, I would miss what God, what the universe wants me to do with my life. So at the end of my year of illness, the Hunger Project totally recovered from my absence. There really wasn't room for me anymore. I could have gone back. They would have welcomed me, but the gap had been filled. And so I took on and became Bill's partner, John's partner, Danielle Cooperman's partner, a wonderful man who also, you could say, is one of our founders, and began the work of the Pachamama Alliance. So sorry for that long story, but I wanted to tell you that because that is happening to you, to me, to all of us right now, with the climate crisis, with the crises that we face in the world today. There's a call coming through to live a committed life, a life that has a purpose larger than yourself, a life where you turn your talent and treasure over to what's being called for in the world today. And I wrote a book about this called Living a Committed Life. It's about to be released this fall, telling not only this story, but the story of many, many people that you and I all admire, who responded to a call, answered it, maybe resisted it like I did in the beginning, living in a way that their life is not about them. It's not their life starring them and their wants and needs and their foibles and the noise in their head about whether or not they're tall enough or thin enough or cool enough or educated enough or developed enough. They turned their life over to something larger than themselves that shapes them into who they need to be to deliver what's wanted and needed on the planet now. And Jim is an example of it. His brilliance, his genius, his eloquence comes from the mission he's serving, shaping him into who he needs to be to deliver on his mission. And so I want to ask my colleagues, first of all, I'm introducing them. First, my beloved partner. She's like my wife, my husband, my best friend, my business partner, and my teacher in many ways, Sara Vetter, who has joined my work at the Soul of Money Institute, but also has become the major gift fundraiser at Pachamama Alliance and gone to the Amazon with us and led trips for the last 12, 13 years to share about how she found her commitment. Because she is an example of someone who's discovered and responded to a call and is living a committed life. And so, Sara, will you share your a little bit of your life, please?
Yeah, I could hear, I've heard that story many, many times, Lynn, and I could hear it again another gazillion times. And then if you've ever been introduced by Lynn Twist in your life, that's worth anything. It's like to be introduced, acknowledged, and recognized by you, Lynn, is always so inspiring. Let's see. Well, my living a committed life happened a little bit later in my life. Most of my life, I lived a very a life where I really was all about accumulating. I was really all about myself, my ego, looking good, fitting a certain mold. I grew up in wealth, and I married a man who was one of the first Microsoft guys, and I lived this Silicon Valley Atherton life with fancy cars and big homes and gated homes and extra homes and private planes, and just and I was completely depressed and miserable, and the whole thing completely blew up, fell apart, ended in my early 40s. And there I was with all these beautiful trappings and a completely empty, vacant soul. And so I hit this really dark place in my life, really dark. And I began to soul search and to look and see there's got to be something more than the trappings of looking a certain way, of being a certain way, of living a certain way, of having all the amazing things I had and had accumulated, which was never enough. So I started on this soul search, and I was, before I met Lynn, my wife, I was going to devote myself to a particular guru. His name's Sadhguru. He's called the modern mystic. And I was ready to just, because I found an inner space, like, oh my gosh, there's an inner space outside of all these trappings. And it started to pull me out of the dark. But then I met Lynn at an event when I was inviting her to come at an event with this particular guru that I thought I was going to devote my life to. But then I met Lynn, and in meeting Lynn and hearing a little bit of her story and going to an event, a fundraiser for Pachamama Alliance, I thought, this is kind of interesting. I want to check this out. And then she invited me to the Amazon, and that was it. I went to the Amazon. I really saw that there was something more outside of myself, that there was this planet, this space that needed caring and needed love and needed attention and needed resources. And here I am swimming in resources, living surrounded by people with massive, ridiculous resources, only accumulating like that. I need to tap into that, because we have this Mother Earth, we have a planet that my children's children, we're going to screw it up. Like, how can I do that? So that's when I turned my life. And then of course, in that space, I started to understand the work of Lynn and living a committed life, and her book, The Soul of Money Institute. And I thought, oh my God, I'm a poster child. Well, I'm a poster child for the Soul of Money, the Soul of Money book, and people's relationship with money. And mine was so screwed up. And I so wanted to live a committed life, which was why I went to the Amazon. And so my wake-up call and my complete transformation was devoting myself to Lynn, the work of the Soul of Money Institute, the work of living a committed life, the work of the Amazon rainforest, the work of Pachamama Alliance. All of that happened when I just hit such a low that I I just was seeking for a space to put my energies, my love, my commitment, my passions, because I was so passionate about so many things, but it was not directed in the way that was that it is now. That gets me up in the morning, that got me to fly home from New York last night at 2 a.m. so I could for sure be present and here on this call. That has me tirelessly do the work that we do, and feel so honored and privileged to have a massive amount of amazing work to do, and all the things that we're committed to and a part of. And it gives me the absolute privilege and honor to ask people for money. I love asking people for money. I love getting big commitments. I love going to people with huge resources that don't know what to do with it, but I can guide them. And I love having a cause, a passion, a purpose, a space to be that person. In my life, if I look back at my life then in Atherton, California, and Silicon Valley, with everything any human being could imagine financially, and I look at my life now, it's like it's indescribable. My sense of peace and love and happiness for myself and for every person I encounter. And that's all because of really just understanding what living a committed life was like and wanting that so badly. So I'm here to say it can happen to anyone. You don't have to be Lynn Twist and have been devoted for 50 years and hang out with Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama. You can just be regular old you and you be you and live a committed life. And so that's my story. And it's been just an absolute privilege and honor to be Lynn's partner and side-by-side sidekick and wife and friend for all these years. So thanks, Lynn. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Sara. That was so beautiful to hear you share. I'm really grateful that you shared the way you came through all this. And it wasn't me, it was really the space of commitment that drew you. And the point we want to make here is that the world is clamoring for people who can commit to something larger than themselves. That's really, you could say, the climate crisis is a message from the earth. It's feedback. It's not happening to us, it's happening for us to find lives of greater meaning, for us to reduce our consumptive patterns like Sara did and actually turn our life over to something larger, the service that is really, really clearly calling all of us. So we wrote a book about it, and with examples, with beautiful stories, with a foreword by Van Jones, who's one of our dearest friends, who's obviously living a committed life if you know him. And my collaborative writer for all of this message is Mary Chase, and I want to introduce her now, Mary Earl Chase. She's an incredible ally for me and for everyone at Pachamama Alliance. She's an extraordinary filmmaker. She's been a collaborative writer on many extraordinary books that you've read, and her name is always a little smaller than the authors. But I'll tell you, with my book, there wouldn't have been any chance of us getting what I'm trying to say in this session into a book without the talent and extraordinary excellence and brain and heart and love of Mary Earl Chase. So Mary, would you share a little bit about whatever you want to say, your committed life, and also the journey of putting this book together, hopefully to inspire thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, millions of people to listen to the call that's coming through right now from the mother, from the future, for us to live lives beyond our own wants and needs, and how the source of life itself is calling for our partnership. So, Mary.
Thank you, Lynn. And it's great to be with all of you. I have known Lynne Twist for 44 years, and for about half of that time have had the great privilege of working closely with her. It started with the Hunger Project, and I had always been, since childhood, wanting to be of service. I think originally I wanted to be a missionary, and actually I probably am a missionary. And when I met Lynne and got connected with the Hunger Project, I felt like I had come home, like there was a place for me to really express my deep love and connection to the human family, and to try to do something about, this great shame of people not being fed. And in the process, I got to know Lynne really well and work with her, and she completely inspired me. She inspired everybody that she worked with her passion and her presence, and the and her devotion to this cause. So that was my beginning with Lynne, and then I took a bit of a break from that and moved to Hawaii with my family for a number of years, and stayed in touch with Lynne, but didn't see much of her. And then when I returned to the Bay Area in 2005, I was so blessed to now get involved with the Pachamama Alliance, which at that point had been working primarily in the Amazon and working with empowering the Achuar to keep the oil, the desecration by oil out of their territory. But now it had responded to the call to change the dream of the modern world. And their Pachamama Alliance created Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream Symposium, which hopefully many of you participated in. I became one of the producers of the video portions of this event, and it just kind of exploded into the world. People volunteered to present it in their communities, and even though it was like a half-day program, it just spread so rapidly. It went into 90 countries. It was translated into many languages, and so I was able to continue working with Pachamama Alliance on that project and on other films and having to do with our educational programs and fundraising, and work closely with Lynne. And over the years, I kept having this feeling, it's time for Lynne to write another book. I had read Soul of Money, and to me, it was one of the most important books of my life. And I thought, golly, it's time for Lynne to do another book. And I just had this sense that I was supposed to be doing this book with Lynne, whatever it was. So I emailed her, and I was so happy when she responded positively. And I found out that she had actually been called by Jack Canfield to his home, and he had 2 or 3 days where he brought in a bunch of people for Lynne and Sara to tell their stories. And so Lynne had told many of the totally fascinating stories of her life that was recorded, and it was transcribed. And so reading those transcripts, I felt like, oh my gosh, there's an incredible memoir here, Lynne. And so we began working on a memoir, which we were calling A Committed Life. But then it transformed over time into realizing that really, rather than just focusing on Lynne's life, we wanted to give people the experience of living a committed life, and what are the distinctions that you needed to have in order to live that kind of life successfully. And so the book became part memoir and part message. And the message is a really powerful one of how do you do this thing? How do you do this? How do you live a life like this? And so I wanted to ask Lynne actually to talk a little bit more about why she wrote the book and what she hopes. Lynne, what do you hope people are going to get out of this book? It's called Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Fulfillment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself.
Well, I, the, let's see, the purpose of this book is to ignite, catalyze, inspire, really in many ways nudge people to live a bigger and more powerful life than a life starring them, and to display and actually make available that anyone can do it. It's, I had this extraordinary experience of this calling, and the Hunger Project also called to me in a very powerful way. But everybody has those experiences. Maybe everybody doesn't get on the top of a mountain in Guatemala with a shaman. I don't mean that, but that life is calling for us now. That's what all these crises are actually about. I learned that from Buckminster Fuller, who I was lucky enough to know and actually, be so touched by in my early motherhood when I knew Buckminster Fuller, and he lived a life. His kind of byline was, can one human being, one little individual, live a life that impacts of all humanity in a positive way? Can you live in a way that generates a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out? And that idea that you would take your life and give it. Also, Brother David Steindl-Rast, another great teacher of mine, says that life is a gift. It's a gift. We've been given this. We've been given it to give. That's why we've received it, so that we can give it. And what any blessings we receive, any talents and treasures we've received, is the purpose of it is to bless, to use that to bless the world. And thinking that's a frame of reference you may or may not want to choose, but I choose it, and I believe it's what's happening now. We have such a challenging world, my God. A crisis in every sector, as Buckminster Fuller predicted, actually, that this would happen by 2025, that every institution of humankind would start to dissolve and become dysfunctional because it's rooted in a you or me world, a you or me paradigm. Either you make it at my expense or I make it at your expense, a paradigm of scarcity, which I wrote about in the Soul of Money book, if you haven't read that one. But that we need to shift to a you and me world, where you and I both make it at no one's expense, because the world is about making sure everybody is taken care of, not just you and yours, not just you and your little unit, your family, your ethnic group, your country, your region, but your job, our job, is to live a life where everyone everywhere has a chance for a healthy and productive life. And that sounds like, oh, that's too grand for me, and oh, that's too lofty, and oh my God, that's for her. She's this person who's saying that. But actually, I think it's true for everybody. I think it's true for everybody, and it is the key to a life of fulfillment, satisfaction, and freedom, in my view. It doesn't entrap you in a commitment. A commitment frees you into who you need to be, especially a calling that you receive from life. It turns your complaints into a commitment. It turns your, trying to figure out which thing to do, keeping the options open. The freedom is in choosing and then giving your all to something, and something that's larger than your own life, something that you can't even check off in your lifetime. You can't ever take credit for it, really. You can contribute to it. So, and I say that it doesn't take any special talent or any special anything. A kindergarten teacher who loves her students and maybe is even doing it for 2 years can make a difference with those children, that they never forget the integrity, the love, the warmth, the belief that she had in them when they were 5 years old. And that shapes their entire life. You can be a kindergarten teacher and make a difference that impacts all humanity. You can be in that kind of commitment, in that kind of way of living. And so you don't need to take on ending world hunger or preserving the Amazon rainforest like I did. It doesn't need to be like that. It can be, I remember my husband used to talk about a bus driver in Chicago when he was in business school, who he always wanted to get to the bus stop at a certain point, because I'll name the guy, I don't remember his name, but let's name him Clarence. Clarence was a large African-American man who every time people got on the bus, he would say, "Bill, how's it going this morning? So glad you made my bus. Have a good day at business school," like that. He was there to welcome, to affirm, to ignite, to uplift people who got on his bus. His bus was going to be the best bus in Chicago. And people on his bus would go to work happy and fulfilled and seen and heard and loved and supported. So it doesn't need to be big. At the same time, we've got big challenges and we need it's like all hands on deck right now. So I wrote the book to inspire, to uplift, to validate, to affirm people's instincts that they can live a bigger life than they're living. And Sara and I also do courses, particularly for women right now. One's called the Sophia Circle, and we have, we have it's starting in October. So if you're interested in it, the Sophia Circle is a course you could take if you're a woman or would like to support a woman, because women in particular, I think, have a role to play right now, a special role to play, because the divine feminine is coming through. It is coming through all of it. It's coming through men. It's coming through women. It is the Sophia century, the century when women will take our rightful role in co-equal partnership with men and the world will come into balance. It is the first century of the third millennium. And as Jim Garrison talks about huge swaths of time, I do too. This is the first century of the third millennium. We're only 22 years in. If you think that way, you start to see that we're igniting something, we're launching something, the next millennium. And I say the first century of the third millennium is the Sophia century, the century when divine feminine wisdom that comes through men too starts to be what we use to address these huge challenges like the climate crisis, the health crisis, the economic crisis, the political crisis, the democratic crisis, the gender crisis, the crisis of inequality, the racial crisis, ending colonialism. All of these crises are up to be broken through. And the breakdown that we're in right now as a human community, every breakdown I've ever seen, and this is one of the things I talk about in the book, has in it the seeds of a breakthrough that's greater than the breakdown. And that's true of the times we're living in right now. No matter how big this breakdown is with the climate crisis, it's happening for us, not to us. It's feedback from the mother to shift the trajectory of our species, the human family, from being a destructive species on this planet to a mutually enhancing, earth reverent species in respect for the entire community of life. So those are some of the reasons I wrote this book, and I know that everybody doesn't necessarily think this way, but I want to ignite everybody listening and everybody who reads this book and everybody who purchases it or takes any of our courses to rethink the way they're living, because the pandemic gave us that gift. Even though it was harsh, people died, we lost friends and relatives, we got sick. It's making us rethink who we are and why we're alive on this planet right now. And I invite you to consider that something's calling you to live a life bigger than your own life, and a purpose that will serve humanity at this very, very, very important time. So Sara, you want to add any thoughts, and then we'll turn it over to Jim.
Hold on. Here we go. I'll just say, I've been working now 12 years with Lynn. She's been doing pro-activism and just living a committed life like forever. But there's something happening to her right now. I just want to say, and to us, but I'll say Lynn, she's like, in an age where you could be retired, but she is refired up. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And it's like we have this energy and space to continue this work, deliver these messages, support women, men, just in everything we're doing. And she's refired up. She, like, things are coming through Lynn, coming through us, that it's almost like the times are saying that there's no more time to stop and see what are we going to do. No, it's happening. So anyone that wants to play with us, be with us, I, by the way, make everything quite fun. We love it because it's just surging through us, through our veins, and in particular through Lynn's veins. So I just wanted to add that you're so refired or fired up in life right now.
Mary, anything you want to add before we invite Jim to
Oh, I love that. Fired up, ready to go.
I'll just say that the Indigenous people, being part of this chapter of my life, so we've been working in the Amazon now for 27 years, they know, they don't question, they're not wondering what to do. They are not fighting for the earth. They know they are of the earth, and the earth and the future is speaking through them. Yesterday, Jim read the famous Rilke quote, which I've been living my life from ever since I heard it many years ago, that the future is speaking through us now. And future generations we are the ancestors of an age to come. That's a phrase from Joseph Campbell. And if you really realize that, Indigenous people in North America, they talk about 7 generations, that they live in a way that's consistent with the health and well-being of the next 7 generations. And I thought that was lovely and romantic when I first heard that years ago. But now I understand what that means. That means that the choices you and I make impact the future of life for the next 1,000 years. And it really does. That's really true. It's not like a pipe dream or something romantic. No, your choices today, on this day, impact the future of life for the next 1,000 years. Now you could think of that, oh my God, that's a burden. No, it ennobles your life. It makes it clear that you can live the most meaningful life any generation of humankind has ever lived. What a privilege to be alive right now. And one of the people I talk about in the book, Joanna Macy, who's 93, she might be 94. When I interviewed her for the book, she said to me this great thing: I'm so excited, I'm alive to see this. We're in the great transition, we're in it. It hurts, it's scary, but everything is being recalibrated, redesigned, resourced, and we're being reborn. And she said, souls are lining up to incarnate, to be part of this, because this is the great turning. This is the great transition. And everybody who knows that wants to play their heart out. And here she is, 96. I'm getting up there myself, but she's 20 years older than me, and she's still going strong. So is Jane Goodall. It's like, this is so exciting. It's so exciting to be alive. It's not depressing. No, it's exciting. We've got so much great work to do. So that's what I mean by answering the call. That's what I mean by living a committed life, being refired, not retired, finding that space in yourself where you can feel you're being called to a greater life than the life you're currently living. And when you do that, all the niggly things that are bothering you, they move to the background. You can't even mess with them, whether or not you're cool enough or tall enough, or whether or not you said the right thing. You just in action. That moves to the background, and your commitment moves to the foreground. So let me see now, Jim. Do you want to interview us or do what you do so well? Take this conversation wherever it wants to go.
Well, I would invite the others to open up their videos so that we can all see each other, first of all. And just note, as you were referring to Joanna, Lynn, Stan Groff turned 90 last year, Michael Murphy, is in his early 90s. Ann Baring. There's a number of the great pioneers and great souls of our time. Gene Houston just turned 85. So we're watching a cohort of people, including yourself and many of us that are now getting north of 60, 70 years old, really coming into our own as if we're teenagers. I mean, I feel like a teenager on Humanity Rising, and I can feel it in all three of you. You're radiant. I mean, you're luminous beings, and I think the sort of the cosmetic effect of the committed life shouldn't be overlooked. That it just vitalizes one's being from the inside out, and is a healing way of presencing yourself in and of itself. And I thought that might be just something you might all want to touch on, is that how a committed life and how the radiance of purpose heals people. Because I think it's fundamentally healing when you feel the deep purpose of knowing why you were born.
I want to just say quick the cosmetic part. I'll just tell you that we take people to the Amazon rainforest for a 2-week deep immersion. And this is so the truth. Every single person, the day they start to the day they end, they look 10 years younger. And I'm not kidding. I can't explain it. And, we're not showering. We're not taking cold showers. I mean, we are showering, but we're not taking nice long hot showers. And we're not doing all the things that sometimes women can do, or I do for maintenance. And every single man, woman, child comes out of there. And it's because of what you're saying, Jim. It's exactly what you're saying. Like when you are coming from within and living a life like that and really understanding, oh my God, this isn't about me. This is about something that is so vital to life, like our Indigenous partners who just know that it just like it reverses you in age. Lynn does act like a teenager pretty much most of the time. So, and I know that's why. When the way she moves in the world, the way we all move in the world with such high energy is because of exactly what you said. But it's good for the skin. It's good for all those other, another benefit.
Yeah. There's a physical aspect to this. There's a somatic aspect. It's an emotional aspect. It's a psychological aspect that when you're feeling whole and you're feeling aligned, every part of you is revitalized. I guess that's what I wanted to emphasize, just looking at the radiance of you three beautiful women on the program today. One even thinks of Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She was meeting with the new prime minister 2 days before she passed and was bustling around apparently. And then all of a sudden, realized it was time, and the family barely had the time to even get there. Such was the speed of the transition. But this was a woman that from the age of 25, when she became queen, till when she passed last week, was full on. In her case, doing her duty, because she was a living archetype. And so that's an inspiration that I think we can also draw from of a committed life. And that leads Lynn and all of you to a question. Lynn, if you would counsel someone that was in your place before you went down to Guatemala about how to think about the committed life when that wasn't something you were even kind of thinking about, how do you kind of create the irritant that gets the ball rolling for people who, we have a lot of conversations with young people about being activists, and most young people don't think of themselves as being activists. They just want to go to school because they have this vague notion that they need to get a job, so they need to go to school. what's that catalyst that comes into a psyche and soul that starts to germinate the notion of commitment as a way of being in the world? How does that ball get rolling? How does that irritant enter the oyster in your experience?
Oh gosh. Well, I have to say, it wasn't just my trip to Guatemala, because the Hunger Project is that too. So the Hunger Project really swept me off my feet. And I would say, in my story, Bucky Fuller and the EST training, the old EST training way back in the 60s and 70s, was a huge deal in my life. Then the Hunger Project came out of that, and the EST training was where I realized my life mattered. But there's things like that. I think people, there's something now called the landmark education work, which is the outgrowth of the EST training, which is also a very, very wonderful program. I'm thinking this, Jim, Humanity Rising does it for people. I'm sure it does for people. I'm sure people, there's thousands and thousands of people listening to this every single day on the different platforms. I'm sure people out there saying, I heard somebody speak at Humanity Rising and, day 272, and I've never been the same. So I think people spark each other. It is like a bonfire that I'd like to start right now, actually, because it's like an ignition, and the conditions are consciousness, paying attention, and the yearning to matter. And I think everybody has a yearning to matter. That's built in. Consciousness isn't necessarily everybody's ball game, because maybe they haven't had that chance. But paying attention is everybody's talent and possibility. If you're really paying attention to the signs, there are signs that guide you in life, I think. And if you're distracted by worrying about yourself and are you doing it right and do people like me and all of the stuff that's part of being human, I do that too. I feel that way all the time. I'm always worried about that, but it's so in the background for me. And when that noise starts to diminish, and meditation can do that, really paying attention to what's going on around you can do that. Then if you give what's calling your attention, your intention, and then you have no tension really, because you just follow. So I feel, and the book really does talk to that, what your question is. It gives you lots of different ways to find that connection with your calling. That's kind of what the book is about in many ways. But there's no easy answer. It's not a first number one, then number two, number three. It's not a formula. It's a being. It's a way of being. That's why the landmark work for me is so powerful, because it's all ontological. It's not philosophical. It's not psychological. It's not even spiritual. It's ontological, and ontology is the study of being. And then you can find your way to your spiritual path, your philosophical path, your psychological, spiritual path, but to pay attention to your being. And then I'll say the Institute of Network Sciences, I've got to give it a nod, because I see it in the chat there. I was co-chair of the Institute of Nordic Sciences on the board for many years, and that's the study of noetic is the study of knowing, of being, and I really learned about consciousness there. And then also from you at the State of the World Forum, I learned about the world. I learned what was going on in the world from the Hunger Project and the State of the World Forum, and I realized, oh my God, I have a role to play here. This is not about everybody else. This is my world, and I have a role to play here. So there's many factors. I try to put them in the book with Mary's help, but there's no easy formula here. But I'd say the number one thing to do is to pay attention and know that calling is taking place right now. That it's not like these are just horrible breakdowns that we need to shut out and we don't want to hear about them because they're too horrible. No, it's a calling. It's a calling. And if we give it our attention, it will call you to what's yours to do.
Beautifully put, beautifully put. You know, you
Um,
think of Andrew Harvey, you know, whatever it is that wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you just have to do something about it.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way in as well. Mary, and then
Yeah, I
Sarah.
just want, people are kind of asking questions about where to start, and I just don't want to let go of this without saying that Pachamama Alliance is a great place to start if you're looking to find a path of service. And the courses that we offer, the community itself is a place where you can find your tribe. And so I urge you to check out Pachamama Alliance. And also, since Sarah and Lynn have mentioned it, the journey to the Amazon, to the rainforest, is completely transformational experience. And so I would encourage you to look into that if you're curious and adventurous and want to have your life just completely blown wide open. So
I can testify to that. And also my son, who was 7 years old at the time, it changed his life. Has it changed mine? So
mine too. My
absolutely right. These
16-year-old.
before and after photos are actually quite dramatic. Even though you're going through sleeplessness and there's mosquitoes and you're traveling all around and you're in canoes and you're eating like weird food, but you're just getting more and more vitalized as the days progress. And that's a powerful experience to undergo. Anything you want to add, Sarah?
The food is great. It's not weird. It's really good. People are so surprised, like pleasantly surprised at how good the food is. No, I'll just add one word to, because I have children in my 20s, and watching them kind of navigate, like, what do they do? And, you know, we talk about this a lot, but listen. I mean, just stop and listen and see what's calling you. Just stop and listen. And it'll show up like it did for all of us here on this call. It'll show up. So I just wanted to add that word, to listen. But yeah. And the food's good in the end.
You know, that's actually a profound point that you're making. And I think a good juncture with which to start to round the program off. You know, if you think about your story, Lynn, it was your willingness to listen to John Perkins, for example, and go to Guatemala, even though it seemed at the time to be off path.
Yeah.
It was your willingness to surrender to the shaman. And instead of getting freaked out at the fact that you were having an out-of-body experience, to surrender it. It was your willingness to look at the faces of the Ghanaians and allow that to incubate in your psyche and soul, that brought you into, I think there's a relationship between listening and remembering. You know, that you remembered something very deep, something very primordial that felled you in the end with malaria. And you talk about ontology. You know, the act of listening changed your ontology. And brought you into a deeper alignment with voices. I mean, if you think about, and I want to bring this in, even though it's an extension of this point. If you think about the listening, you just think, everyone, that the Achuar Indians were down there in the middle of nowhere in the jungle of Ecuador. They started to send out frequencies, prayers, ritual intention. And somehow Lynn and Bill and John were brought in to that frequency in the invisible realm through a capacity to listen that wasn't about your ears. You know, and I think, you that the committed life begins with the listening of the soul.
Mhm.
And that whatever it is that breaks your resistance down to that kind of deep listening is, what we go to Est for, or Landmark, or Esalen, or even down to the rainforest, where we have to go through some kind of discomfort because it's breaking us apart for what you said, Sara, to even occur. And then we need to submit to that. And out of that comes a purpose that transforms everything we are. Does that sound right to you, Lynn?
Yes, I love that. I love the way you put that. It's very and if we're listening to the world right now, rather than criticizing it or
Mm,
arguing with it, I mean, you can't argue with the climate crisis. You have to listen to it. You have to really understand that this is it's serious business, and we're the perpetrators, and we have the solution for the climate crisis. And to listen to it is a gift that Pachamama Alliance has somehow found its way to hear it in a way and respond. And that's why this week that you've given us is such a precious gift that you've given to Pachamama Alliance. All the different dimensions of what we do are all functions of listening deeply to the messages. When we first thought this call was coming from the Achuar, and it did. So I want to just acknowledge them. But then I realized it was coming from the forest through the Achuar. And then I realized after I saw that, we began to see it's coming through the forest from the spirit of life, through the forest, through the Achuar to us. And the spirit of life is speaking very, very eloquently now, and very profoundly now, in so many ways, in our bodies, people getting all kinds of illnesses that no one can name, autism on the rise, all kinds of things happening to us in our bodies that are it's the spirit of life speaking to us, calling for us to make very, very powerful transformations. You could say changes, but transformations, really transformations that will give us the life we're longing for. So I totally agree with Sara and with you that deep, committed listening will generate the pathway to your committed life.
beautiful, beautiful. Thank you all. You've appeared with angelic, inspirational power today, and with a radiance that just makes me feel very happy from the inside out. And I love you so dearly, Lynn. And even though Sara and Mary, we haven't met, I love you too.
I love you too.
Likewise. I've always loved you.
And this
Come back to the Amazon so you can experience the upgrade in the food.
This notion that Lynn just brought in, that the Achuar were listening to the trees, the jungle, and the jungle was listening to the spirit of life. And it's just reverberating, and we can listen at that level too.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the beauty of Pachamama and the Pachamama Alliance and a committed life. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Sara. Thank you, Mary. This has been a beautiful, beautiful session. God bless us all as we listen as deeply as we can to a crying world that wants, through us, to save herself.
And then I want to encourage people to come tomorrow for the final day of our Pachamama week with Maisa Arias and Mario Trigueros, who are going to do an awesome job of having the last session of this wonderful conversation in this week of awesome opportunities to hang out with you, Jim. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to a close for today. You're welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link that Stan just put in the chat box. Deep listening, big heart. Thank you all. See you tomorrow. Wonderful session. Wonderful session.